He is pure evil, but you'd never know it by looking at him. But when you hear him, that's another story. His killing field was Milwaukee, and he got away with murder for more than a decade.
This little apartment in Milwaukee, police discovered the grisly remnants of one of the most horrible crime sprees in American history.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our crime documentary series. Today, we will delve into the chilling story of Jeffrey Dahmer, a notorious serial killer who terrorized society with a string of brutal murders.
No one had a clue as to what was happening for over a decade.
Prepare to delve into the dark and haunting tale of his heinous acts. On July 23, 1991, personnel from the Milwaukee Police Department encountered a naked man in handcuffs running in the street. The individual escorted the officers to Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, where the victim alleged he had been drugged and assaulted. After officers gained access to the residence, Dahmer was quickly taken into custody. The victim showed the officers the decapitated head of a male in the refrigerator he had previously seen, and a full criminal investigation commenced. The kitchen and dining area of the apartment show the muriatic acid and degreaser agents. Polaroid photos of victims are on top of the portable freezer. The Jeffrey Dahmer case presented unusual dynamics due to the nature of the murders, intense media coverage, and sexual orientation of many of the victims. The majority of the victims were homosexual and had been reported missing by their families for many weeks to months. The trial was followed closely and watched around the world. Who is Jeffrey Dahmer? Jeffrey Dahmer, infamously known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, born May 21, 1960, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, U.S. Died November 28, 1994, Portage, Wisconsin, was an American serial killer who took the lives of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Dahmer committed his first murder in Bath Township, Ohio, in 1978. A second murder followed in 1987, and during the next 5 years he killed, mostly in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, another 15 boys and young men who were for the most part poor and African American, Asian, or Latino.
After the first killing was not planned.
Dahmer was a controlled, organized serial killer. He used to seek out his victims at gay bars, malls, and bus stops, lured them home with promises of money or sex, and gave them alcohol laced with drugs before strangling them to death. He would then engage in sex acts with the corpses before dismembering them and disposing of them, often keeping body parts as souvenirs. He frequently took photos of his victims at various stages of the murder process, so he could recollect each act afterward and relive the experience. Although other serial murderers had claimed far more victims, Dahmer's crimes were particularly gruesome, involving cannibalism and necrophilia.
And as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons, and eventually I did turn to cannibalism.
Born in Milwaukee to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, Jeffrey was described as an energetic and happy child until the age of 4, when a traumatic and painful recovery following surgery to correct a double hernia seemed to affect a change in the boy. By the time Dahmer was of school age, the family had moved to Ohio. From a young age, Dahmer developed a fascination with animal bones and studied how to clean and preserve them. By his early teens, he was disengaged, tense, and largely friendless. Dahmer claims that his compulsions toward necrophilia and murder began around the age of 14, but it appears that the breakdown of his parents' marriage and their acrimonious divorce a few years later might have been the catalyst for turning these thoughts into actions. Dahmer also started drinking at age 14, and by the time of his first killing at age 18, his alcohol consumption had spun out of control. He dropped out of Ohio State University after one quarter term, and his recently remarried father insisted that he join the army. Dahmer enlisted in late December 1978 and was posted to Germany shortly thereafter. His drinking problem persisted, and in early 1981, the army discharged him. It is not believed that he took any victims while serving in the armed forces. Following his discharge, Dahmer returned home to Ohio. An arrest later that year for disorderly conduct prompted his father to send Dahmer to live with his grandmother Catherine Dahmer in Wisconsin. But his alcohol problem continued, and he was arrested the following summer for indecent exposure. He was arrested once again in 1986 when two boys accused him of masturbating in front of them. He received a 1-year probationary sentence. Dahmer's first murder occurred just after graduating from Revere High School in June 1978, when he picked up an 18-year-old hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and took him home to his parents' house.
The hitchhiker's name was Stephen Hicks. He was just 18. Jeffrey Dahmer took him to his parents' house. There he strangled him with a barbell. He dismembered the body and hid it in a drain pipe. It was Jeffrey Dahmer who gave those details to the police in his confession.
Dahmer proceeded to get the young man drunk, and when Hicks tried to go, Dahmer said, "I didn't want him to leave." Dahmer killed him by striking him in the head and strangling him with the barbell. Dahmer dismembered Hicks' corpse, packed the body parts in plastic bags, and buried them behind his parents' home. He later exhumed the remains, crushed the bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered them across a wooded ravine. It wasn't until September 1987 that Dahmer took his second victim, Stephen Tuomi. They checked into a hotel room and drank, and Dahmer eventually awoke to find Tuomi dead, with no memory of the previous night's activities. He later told police he intended to drug Tuomi but not kill him.
It was an intoxicated boyfriend of another boyfriend.
Well, how old was this child?
He wasn't a child, he was an adult.
After the police left, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered that boy, Conorak Synthesum phone.
And he could not believe this had happened. Dahmer bought a large suitcase to transport Tuomi's body to his grandmother's basement, where he dismembered and masturbated on the corpse before disposing of the remains. He kept Tuomi's head, which was wrapped in a blanket, for weeks after the murder. Dahmer killed 2 more victims at his grandmother's house before she forced him to move out in 1988. She did not know about his crimes, but was tired of his drinking, his tendency to bring young men to her house, and the foul smells occasionally coming from her basement. In March 1989, he lured, drugged, strangled, sodomized, photographed, dismembered, and disposed of Anthony Sears, an aspiring model. Dahmer found Sears particularly attractive and later said he did not want to lose him, and so Sears became the first victim from whom Dahmer kept preserved body parts for a long time, mummifying his head and genitals. Over the next 2 years, Dahmer had killed 12 more people, bringing his total victim count to 17. His first victim during this time was a prostitute named Raymond Smith, whom Dahmer lured to his apartment for sex, gave a drink laced with sleeping tablets, and then strangled. With his next victim, Edward Smith, Dahmer accidentally destroyed his skull while trying to dry it in the oven, making it explode. He later told police he felt rotten about Smith's murder because was unable to keep anything from his bod, making it feel like a true waste.
There were protests and press conferences in Milwaukee as people tried to understand how this could have happened in their midst. How did Jeffrey Dahmer get away with murder after murder for 13 years?
Dahmer then started experimenting with chemical means of disposal and often consuming the flesh of his victims. Dahmer also attempted crude lobotomy. He drilled into the skull of his 11th victim, Errol Lindsay, while he was still alive and injected him with muriatic acid. Dahmer hoped this would place Lindsay into a permanent submissive state, but Lindsay awoke during the procedure and said, "I have a headache."
My name is Rita Isbell, and I'm the oldest sister of Errol Lindsay. Whatever your name is, Satan. I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. This is out of control.
What time is it? So Dahmer strangled him. On May 27, 1991, Dahmer's neighbor Sandra Smith called the police to report that an Asian boy was running naked in the street. When the police arrived, the boy was incoherent, and they accepted the word of Dahmer, a white man in a largely poor black community, that the boy was his 19-year-old lover. In fact, the boy was 14 years old and was, unbeknownst to Dahmer, the younger brother of the Laotian teen Dahmer had molested 3 years earlier. The police escorted Dahmer and the boy home, clearly not wishing to become embroiled in a homosexual domestic disturbance. Once they left the scene, Dahmer injected hydrochloric acid into the boy's brain, killing him. Had the police conducted even a basic search, they would have found the body of Dahmer's 12th victim, Tony Hughes. Dahmer killed 4 more men before he was finally arrested. One of his last victims was Oliver Lacey, 24. He kept Lacey's head and heart in his refrigerator and his skeleton in a freezer. Dahmer was caught on July 22, 1991. Two Milwaukee police officers were led to Dahmer when they picked up Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old black man who was wandering the streets with handcuffs dangling from his wrist. They decided to investigate the man's claims that a weird dude had drugged and restrained him. Edwards claimed that the knife Dahmer had threatened him with was in the bedroom.
What'd you do? What happened? Tell us what happened step by step as best you can remember.
And then all of a sudden he kind of calms down, you know, and then he said he has a key in the bedroom, so we proceed to the bedroom.
The key to the handcuffs.
Right.
Subsequent searches revealed a head in the refrigerator, 3 more in the freezer, and a catalog of other horrors, including preserved skulls.
If you were out on the street now, would you still be committing the crimes?
Probably. If this hadn't happened, there's no doubt I probably would be. I can't think of anything that would have stopped me.
Jars containing genitalia and an extensive gallery of macabre Polaroid photographs of his victims. Dahmer was subdued by the officers, after which he muttered the words, "For what I did, I should be dead." Dahmer's trial began in January 1992. Lionel Dahmer and his second wife attended the trial throughout. Dahmer was killed on November 28, 1994, by his fellow prison inmate Christopher Scarver. Dahmer was assigned to work with 2 other convicted murderers, Scarver and Jesse Anderson. After they had been left alone to complete their tasks, guards returned to find that Scarver had brutally beaten both men with a metal bar. Dahmer was pronounced dead after approximately 1 hour. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer continued to haunt the American consciousness, prompting the need for mental health awareness. It underscores the importance of early intervention in cases of abnormal behavior. His life and crimes offer a disturbing glimpse into the darkest corners of human nature. His case continues to be a point of reference in criminology and psychology, offering valuable insights into the making of a serial killer.